Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today we're talking about submarines again, but this time Tier 10 submarines. So, for those of you that don't know, not the PT server, the test server, which is still up today and tomorrow if you guys want to get your hands on these Tier 10 submarines, added in Tier 10 submarines for testing. They removed the Tier 6 submarines and the Tier 6 ships that they gave you, and added in Tier 10 ones now. And this is the first time we've gotten our hands on these Tier 10 submarines. Only two of them, though, the Tier 10 American submarine Yall and the Tier 10 German submarine, the U-2501. Now, these ships were announced as the Tier 10s, but again, we haven't gotten our hands on them until now. So just like the last submarine video we did, I'm going to talk about, first off, what it's like to play against these submarines in each class. Then we're going to talk about what it's like to play these submarines themselves in the second half of the video. So, what's it like to play against Tier 10 submarines? Well, it's in many ways, well, the same as the Tier 6 submarines. I feel that the toolbox available to surface ships to deal with these submarines is plentiful this time around. Now, there's still that weird case of some ships get the airstrike, some battleships that I'm saying get the airstrike, and some battleships don't. The Axis powers, for the most part, except for the Japanese, do not have access to the airstrikes. The GK doesn't, the Colombo doesn't either, which, again, I still find strange considering the Italian Navy operated mostly in the Mediterranean, where there will be plenty of air support there. And again, with the Germans, like we talked about last time, too, air cover for German naval operations was very much a thing during World War II, but again, for some reason, they're missing out on that, and the Soviets are as well. Kremlin doesn't get the airstrike either. But for those that do get the airstrikes, they are just as potent as they were before. It works exactly the same way. Seems to drop the same number of depth charges, 8, 4 from each plane. There's 2 planes per flight. You get 2 charges of it. They reload in roughly, I think, 20 seconds. So it's a pretty quick cooldown time on the charge. I'm sorry, 40 seconds, but you get 2 of them. And by the time you use the one, well, actually, by the time they get there, it takes 20 seconds for them to get there. So by the time they've dropped their depth charge, they're almost already back in just another 20 seconds. So it's a pretty quick cooldown time either way. So it gives battleships a fighting chance against these submarines. But again, it's weird that some get them and some don't. I don't know if they've explained why or why not yet, but it is what it is. Depth charges, again, are very effective against submarines. This go-round, I played the Caballeros, which is one of my favorite destroyers. I got to use her depth charges quite a bit. They worked quite well. I am disappointed to see that the Holland does not have her full ASW weaponry available to her. She has mortars on the front of her deck, and there's slats for rocket launchers on the side of her turrets. So I was hoping that maybe we could see those in action with this test, but we have not. Maybe they'll add them in later. I do not know if they've commented on those just yet. But again, depth charges all around, very effective for dealing with these submarines. The higher tier cruisers, there is a bit of a lack of depth charges. And someone said, oh, when you upgrade to the B-hull, you don't get depth charges anymore. That's because historically on those ships, when they got their refit, they removed depth charges from them. That's not wargaming trying to screw you and force you to stick with the A-hull. That was many a comment on not only that submarine video, but also on the live stream on Friday night. But yeah, that's just from the historical aspect. But for example, the Hindenburg gets depth charges. And I had a really fun match in the Hindenburg where it was kind of chaotic, surrounded by destroyers and submarines on all sides, and you're in the Hindenburg, which isn't the best anti-DD cruiser, but it's not the worst either. So, I'm sailing through this, I think it was 2 submarines and like 3 destroyers, trying to deal with all of them at the same time. Depth charges are flying off the racks or rolling off the back of the ship, and it was pretty chaotic. It was a beautiful bit of chaos, I must say. But yeah, same thing, pretty effective here too. The only thing is the subs have a bit more health at this tier, so you do have to land a couple more depth charges on them to really sink them, but they are, again, still pretty squishy by tier 10 standards. So that's what it's like to play against submarines. What's it like to play submarines this go-round at tier 10? Well, happy news for those that were very sad about what happened to the tier 6 submarines. The Tier 10 submarines, the dive time is much more generous. It's just about 10 minutes for the below and for the U-2501. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the Balal's name. I don't know if it's Balal, Balo, however you say it. I know it's named after a shark. But anyway, both ships have near a 10-minute dive time. The U-2501 has a 9-minute 55-second dive time. The Balal has a 9-minute 44-second dive time. But with the American submarine, you do get the 3 charges of the emergency battery reserve still, so you get another minute and a half of dive time there if you time those properly. So it really has like a 11.5-minute dive time, which is very, very, very good. It's very, very, very nice to be able to spend actual lengths of time underwater. And the torpedoes are better this time around in terms of range and the amount that you get. The Balao is definitely, I still would say go with that one. She has a 14-kilometer range on her torpedoes, whereas the U-2501 only has a 10-kilometer range. And, I mean, by Tier 10 standards, it's workable for sure, but I mean, you can't build into the stealthiness of these submarines, which I found pretty odd, considering these are supposed to be like a super stealthy class. There's no concealment expert, there's no concealment module at all either. So that's a little strange. I thought maybe we'd at least get the module if we weren't going to get the commander skill. So you have to get pretty close with the U-2501, but it can work. You just have the fast diving plane consumable to where you can quickly escape the situation if it does go south. Still no heal on either of these submarines, and both of these submarines have just over 10,000 health. The U-2501 has 13,400, and the Blue has, I believe, 14,000, because it's the bigger ship. Yeah, 14,300. So, not a lot of health at all. Does not take a lot of depth charges to sink these ships. I screwed up at one time, and I was trying to go out on a mega flank, and I ran to a Shimakaze, and the guy just nuked me with 1 rack of depth charges. So yeah, you can't really afford to make mistakes in these ships, but again, with the battery charge being bigger, there is certainly more time to be a bit stealthy, take your time to stay underwater for extended periods of time. So, speaking of the torpedoes, how are these homing torpedoes at Tier 10? Well, they don't seem to be any more accurate than the Tier 6 ones. They still aren't, like I said in the Tier 6 submarine video, they are definitely not like Ace Combat mega lock-on missiles or anything like that. They're definitely easy to dodge if you know they're coming at you. And the recipe that I found to work playing submarines is that, you know, just get the best predictive shot you can out with your torpedoes. Wait until the torpedoes are, I would say, about 60% of the way there, then try to ping the target. Now with the below, it's like 14 kilometers is the maximum torpedo range. So I wouldn't try to torpedo that range. You can get about 12 kilometers away from the target and be able to ping it pretty easily if it's a larger target like a heavy cruiser or a battleship. Because at that point, the enemy ship has only maybe 10-15 seconds of warning. And then, even then, like I should be playing the Conqueror clip right now. If it's a maneuverable ship like the Conqueror, they can still dodge it pretty easily. So sometimes dummy firing may be the way to go, just so they don't know that the torpedoes are on their way. In terms of damage, too, I mean, again, the torpedoes have been neutered. I'm assuming that the original Tier 10 submarines did way more damage than this. With the below, you have 6,500 maximum damage for your torpedoes, and with the U-2501, it's only 5,800. So yeah, not a lot of damage per torpedo. You do have a bunch, so don't get me wrong. I think the biggest hit I got was like a 15k hit on the Conqueror. I think I hit him in either his bow or stern off of his torpedo protection with like 4 or 5 torpedoes at once, and that's the biggest hit that I got. So, but like they said, these ships are now supposed to go after cruisers and destroyers. But if large ships like battleships and cruisers, large cruisers, heavy cruisers, can dodge these torpedoes with little warning, the destroyers and light cruisers most definitely can, especially if you're in a fast ship like a destroyer. For example, I got a lock-on when I was playing Khabarovsk, and I just turned it a big circle, and the torpedoes couldn't maneuver that hard, and the guy missed, and he wasn't even that far away from me either. So, yeah, the torpedoes they're going to take some getting used to for sure, but I'm sure once these ships come out fully, people will get used to them and they will be able to land consistent hits. They are definitely accurate enough, and the homing is definitely good enough to where you can get hits over time, but the damage really isn't there to go after larger ships. Like, there's this AFK Montana, and I hit him with 2.5 full sets of torpedoes, and he was AFK, not on his damage con or anything like that, and he didn't sink after 2 full sets from the blow. So, yeah, damage has definitely been knocked down compared to where it was before. But again, the big improvement with the tier 10 ships is that you can spend just about half of the match underwater if you really want to. Now, with being detected and stuff, that battery charge is going to drain faster, but still, 9 minutes and 55 seconds base time is a lot better than 4 minutes and 55 seconds base time. It's a lot better. You can spend a lot more time underwater. You can be a bit more stealthy. You can get out of bad situations a lot easier than you could with the tier 6 ships. Now, again, the tier 6 ships, they are early submarines. Well, none of these ships are technically submarines except for the U-2501. Again, technically, the other ships were designed to be at the surface most of the time, and then the U-2501's one of the world's first actual submarines that's meant to spend most of its time underwater. So there is that, and I thought maybe that would be reflected here with like some stupidly long underwater time with the U-2501 to compensate for its lack of stealth and lack of torpedo range, like maybe like 12 or 13 minutes. But it's not. It's almost the same as the below. Again, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I may have Google lady pronounce it for me. But another change here is that none of these ships have secondary guns. The U-2501 does have AA guns, but they don't work at the moment. So there's that. Against carriers too. Carriers don't have any defense against these ships. They just have their planes, and you gotta wait for them to surface. So that's about it. So carriers may be a prime target for these submarines. If you catch one by itself and it can't do anything to you, you just kind of have your way with it. Although, apparently, this one carrier that I ran into while playing, I think the American Submarine, he was quite a good dodger of torpedoes, so hats off to him, but we did get him in the end. Now, is 10 minutes too much time underwater? No, not at all. It's, I think, the sweet zone that most of the submarines should probably have, but maybe with the higher tier ones, maybe they should all have access to the emergency reserve consumable that gives them 30 seconds of unlimited battery supply. I don't know, I'm just saying, like, 10 minutes is a pretty solid time. Like, if that was what the tier 6, the tier 8, and the tier 10 got, I think that would be pretty decent overall. It's definitely not too much time underwater, because even on the matches that were only about 15 minutes long, by the end of it, most of the submarines that I saw that were players, well, all of them were players because everyone wants to play these things in the test server right now, most of them had very little or no charge left at all on their submarines. Only one time did this one guy on the enemy team still had like half of his charge left. But by that time, there were still 4 ships left alive on my team, and they just all dogpiled on him and just depth charged him to Kingdom Come, so not really a big deal there, in my mind, at least. I know that was a big complaint, too, from the first test, is that the submarines could just indefinitely stay underwater, but I think instead of just changing the mechanic to where they had to come up to charge their batteries, Wargaming just went kind of in the full opposite direction and put the hard limit on the amount of time underwater. But overall, tier 10 submarines are a lot more fun to play. You actually get to see that underwater world that the art department, which looks very good. Art department, again, caring. And the sub models, too. They look fantastic. Some of the small details on these submarines, it blew me away that they modeled that. Like, it's really, really crazy when you get to looking at some of these submarines and some of the details and the slats and stuff. And between the outer hull and the inner hull, you can actually see in there, there's actually shadows shadowing inside of those pieces. It's like, wow, they actually modeled that. So yeah, again, art department doing a great job here. You get to experience the underwater world. They're a lot funner to play. They are very fast, and I know that's a complaint from some people, but I mean, considering, you know, how big the map is relative to the size of the ship, they gotta kind of be that fast where they can actually get into position to do anything. So there is that. But anyway, guys, that's my first impression of the higher tier submarines. They're a lot better than the tier 6 subs. If they come out in this state, I do think these submarines will be pretty okay. Like I said, the torpedoes, They don't do a lot of damage. The homing isn't crazy. The reload time on them isn't very quick either. The U-2501, for example, it takes 85 seconds to reload the torpedo's base. And different submarines have different reloading methods. The U-2501, I noticed it reloads its torpedoes in pairs. The American submarine, they load each individual torpedo tube, but each individual torpedo tube's reload time is only 23 seconds. So it's kind of a bit faster, but I mean, overall, I think it comes out to be about the same reloading speed. But I do think these submarines are actually pretty well balanced in terms of gameplay and the mechanics involved with them. And they weren't really an issue when I was playing surface ships. They were just kind of an annoyance. Like, you know, if you got singled out, then you might have 2 of them on you. But if you're around other ships or other cruisers, most submarines, for now at least, don't want to go near them, because you can easily, again, just blast these things off the map with the ASW planes, or with the depth charges, or with your guns too if they surface right next to you. So yeah, that's my impression of the tier 10 subs. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Have you had a chance to play them out yet? And what's your thoughts on them? Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 30,000 subs. Just passed 26,500 the other day, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. Again, guys, hope you're having a wonderful Monday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.